Chimigwech, Tlasukomati, gracias, thank you so much, merci, shishe, shukran. We can keep going. I can't tell you how grateful I am to be here today with you. I'm grateful for Tony and his organizing committee. I'm grateful to the West Michigan President's Compact. I'm grateful that the Compact exists at all. And I'm grateful that, and can we have a round of applause for that? I'm grateful for the fact that it was born out of vision and not as a response to chaos, right, or a crisis. That's what really needs to be applauded, right? Because it was progressive thinking, it was a positive vision. It started, like my distinguished colleague, Dr. Tanya Williams, talking about this morning, it started from the right place. It started from the heart. It wasn't a crisis that was sort of imposed on the leadership, right? It was visionary leadership, courageous leadership, and now that we have a crisis, we actually have institutional structures to deal with it. We already have a place, right? We created this safe space, and we've had a beautiful conversation all day about these things, right? But it started from progressive, courageous vision. And so I'm very grateful for you all. I'm especially grateful for Tony. It's just wonderful to see you again on a personal level. I'm grateful to my colleague, Dr. Williams, for engaging us in such an important and deep conversation about not just where we want to go as a campus community, not just where we want to go really, as a nation, but where we should be headed as humanity, right? Where everybody on the entire globe feels whole, feels valued, feels safe and secure psychologically and physically, right? That really is the vision. And so I think our talks are going to complement each other really, really well. Because Dr. Williams started where everything really needs to start. This is really, and I want to validate that and acknowledge that it really has to start here. And for those of you that read the work of Paulo Freire, it starts in the heart. Teaching is an act of love, right? And maybe we don't talk about love as much as we should. Nell Noddings calls it authentic caring, right? Many of us got into education, wanted to become educators because we love other people, right? And so Calvin and some of the other religiously affiliated schools can even talk about it in terms of a Christian love, right? And so, but we should all be coming from that space of caring and love. And if we truly love our others, right, we do want them to be safe, secure. We want them to be whole, and we want them to be valued. And so I think Dr. Williams did a better job than I ever could, right, talking about the internal and the interpersonal, right? I happen to operate in an environment that many of you are operating in now. I operate in an environment, for better or worse, that is all about quantitative measures. For anybody that knows anything about federal TRIO programs, the numbers matter, right? And so funding in the state now with performance-based metrics, the numbers matter, right? The federal government's moving in the same direction, right? So they're posting your retention numbers. They're posting your graduation numbers. They're posting your financial aid loan default numbers. These numbers have a very real structural and institutional impact. And so it's important to be aware of them, but it's also important to acknowledge that the real work starts here. And so I have one real easy example. I'm the founding director of the TRIO program at Eastern. There are a few things that could have gotten me away from the work that I was doing with the study for Latino and Latin American studies, because I loved my work there and I loved the campus, but I felt like I had a debt to TRIO. I don't think I would have even graduated college without TRIO. I'm sure I wouldn't have graduated college without TRIO. And I'm sure I wouldn't have ever even thought of completing a PhD, much less actually do it, without the influence of McNair. And so I felt called, impelled to become a founding director of a TRIO program. And so our numbers were good the first year, right? I could go to the provost, I could go to the associate provost, I could go to the dean of the graduate school and say, yes, our numbers are good. I could write a good APR, right, for the federal government. Yes, our numbers are on track. We were placed in an administrative building. What did I hear from the students? They came in, we hit our number, we could check the box. We saw that student, we helped them with their FAFSA. We saw that student, we helped them get advising, number accomplished. What did we hear from the students? This is on the whole other side of campus. This is literally a 30-minute walk each way. I'll come if you make me, right? I'm glad your numbers are good, right? Thanks for helping with me advising. So what did we do? I lobbied internally to actually accomplish another dream of mine, to have a living learning community, a miniature residential college, right? Where all the services, what's the point of having a student service program if the students don't want to go and get the services, right? And who blames them when there's 10 inches of snow and it's 10 below and they have to walk 30 minutes each way for tutoring? Who's going to do that, right? Every time I now have an administrative meeting, I understand where my students are coming from because I'm walking that walk now because now we're in the dorms. And what's happened? The numbers are still good, thank goodness, right? Actually, they're probably even better, right? Before 8:30, earlier this week, before 8:30, we're talking college kids, right? Before 8:30, I'd already helped 3 students with significant issues. I think it was either Tuesday or Wednesday. And a meeting, you know, with my direct report at 9. How are things going? I just helped 3 students. I can't get students out of my office. Why? Because they've embraced the space, right? They feel that it's their space. They've owned the space. They're not being invited, right, from the peripheries to come for the space for specialized services and then go away. We brought the services to them, right? We made their lives easier. And one of my mentors has always said, if you do the right thing and you do it well, the numbers will take care of themselves. So we start with doing the right thing. And so, again, I'm very grateful to my colleague for starting this conversation in the right place, because it is about relationships. And they thought I was crazy that I wanted to convert a dorm room into an office. And now my students have a safe space, and these relationships are stronger than they ever were, right? And so the internal, the interpersonal, but again, it's not lost on me that these institutional and structural pressures exist, right? And so the title that I chose actually comes from this. During the I Have a Dream speech, Martin Luther King said, "The sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent." Legitimate discontent. There are reasons that people are angry, and they're legitimate and they're valid. The sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. And so I'm thankful for you for inviting me to one of my favorite places in Michigan during one of my favorite times of year. It is beautiful here right now, right? And so I'm thankful for that experience. Unfortunately, the current context reminds us, just like our heat wave last week, summer's not over. Not by a long shot. Remember when we were talking about post-racialized society just a couple of years ago? The summer's not over. And so what does this sweltering summer look like? Another thing I want to qualify is I appreciate, I embrace, I acknowledge inclusivity, diversity, equity, and I believe with my colleague that what we should really be striving for is social justice. My presentation is not going to deal with all of that. And so I'm also grateful to my colleague for talking about these issues in a very broad way that needs to be talked about. My work and my research focuses specifically on racial and ethnic achievement gaps and closing them. And so my talk is going to be very narrowly focused around that. And then I'll end with some things that bring it back to the broad. But just wanted to qualify that for a second. So it's not without being aware of these issues and embracing them. It's just that's not the scope of my talk today. So the sweltering summer. '13 was a sweltering summer. 14 was a sweltering summer. 15 was a sweltering summer. 16 and 17 continue to be sweltering summers. People have a right, people have a reason to be upset, to feel violated, to feel scared. And your campuses aren't immune from the greater social context. But your campuses are places just like this forum that are uniquely constructed to have these conversations. Isn't that our vision? Isn't that why the universities were created? To have these kinds of discourses, to have these kinds of dialogues, to do this kind of research, to educate people, right? To move society to a better place. That's why we exist as universities. That's why education has existed from the very beginning. We're not immune from this. And we're not immune from being targets. And so throughout the country, Connecticut to California, including the Midwest, including Michigan, we as campuses have been violated. Our students are feeling this, our faculty is feeling this, our administrative support staff, everybody on our campus, the communities around our campus, they're all being affected by this. It's not something that we can run away from. It's not something that we can look away from, right? And it's definitely here in Michigan. And there are consequences. I would not want to be a university president right now. Any and every choice that you have, there's going to be consequences, there are going to be potential benefits, and there's going to be significant consequences for your choices. It's not an easy time, right? But it is a time for courageous leadership and courageous action, right? When people start tying funding to these outcomes, funding, right? This level of accountability, funding to your decisions around these kinds of issues, it becomes a very dangerous environment. And you begin to feel like no matter what you do, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. You want to protect your students from offensive, racist, harmful messages, and now you're hit with a First Amendment lawsuit. You want to create a safe space for your students that everybody feels included, everybody feels welcome, everybody feels whole. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. It's not an easy environment right now. It's a sweltering summer. And up until maybe the last couple of years, we still have this other work that we're doing, right? Yes, we are platforms. Yes, we are a place where dialogue and discourse should take place. Yes, we're places of education. We want our students to graduate, right? That's another part of our mission. We just want our students to do well, right? We want them to do well in biology. We want them to do well in math. We want them to get the degree in accounting. We want to get them their degree in social work. And we're being held to account to those numbers too. And so again, up until the last couple of years, for about 10 years or so, my research and my work focused on closing these racial and ethnic educational achievement gaps. And the gaps are still very, very real. I'm going to have one more qualifier, and I hope this will be the last one. There is a group, again, I'm fully aware of this, that is not represented, and they won't be represented in some comparative data too, and those are Asian Americans, right? For those of you that are familiar with the field, Asian American racial and ethnic attainment gaps are very, very different, right? So it's a very different population with different kinds of levels of achievement when it comes to higher ed. And so the numbers also reflect a reality, right? So I'm fully aware that there are lies, and there are damn lies, and there are statistics, right? I know this, right? And I know that there are stories, that are underneath, right, the numbers and the percentages and the statistics. But I also know that they're helpful benchmarks. How do I know this? Because Google Map was telling me you need to turn around, right? I had passed the exit, and I needed to go a couple miles down the road and come back. And so these measurements are important as well as benchmarks. They help us know if we're on track or not. We have to get off at the next exit and turn back around. Or we keep going, right, for 10 more miles, okay? And so they are helpful for that reason. But again, I think the best research is this combination. And I'm really grateful to be part of this combination of both qualitative and quantitative research. Right? And so Michigan looks a lot like the rest of the country. The one little caveat is that the racial and ethnic diversity of Michigan doesn't necessarily reflect the rest of the country, especially when you're talking about Latinos, right? Latinos are a much bigger proportion of the country than here in Michigan, but being in Grand Rapids, you know what's happening, right, with that population. And so, but it's interesting that the educational attainment still looks relatively the same, despite the differences in numerical diversity. And so, given the chaos, given the crisis, given all the issues that we're dealing with right now, it's so easy to get lost in that. It's so easy to get distracted, right? It's so easy, even distracted in good ways, working with individuals, right, on their healing process. So I'm not trying to use distraction in a bad way, right? But it really is easy in a crisis to lose sight, right, of some of these objectives and the fact that we, I think, are moving in the right direction. That's a weird thing to say, right? Given the current climate, for me to stand up here and say, we're moving in the right direction. How do I know that? The data says it, right? But we have to remember that the bar was pretty low to start with, right? So the racial and ethnic, they didn't even use the word ethnic back then, right? It was just racial. And there was only 2 races that the census recognized, right? And so you're either white or you're non-white, right? And this makes the data comparison a little complicated, right? The achievement of even the majority population wasn't that high, right? This is pre-GI Bill kind of thing, right? And so people, especially here on the west side of the state and other parts of the country, continue to work on farms, right? Continue to work in the projects of industrialization and didn't necessarily finish high school, right? And so 21.5%, right, of whites had a high school diploma. That's in 1950. That's really not that far, right, into history. But fewer than 10%, right? 8% of non-whites could say the same. So fewer than 1 in 10. And that really speaks to the lack of educational opportunity and access that existed at that time. Right? Again, the bar was really, really low. 2% had a college degree. And imagine the struggle to get that college degree in the 1950s. I chose 1950 for a reason, because 1950 is straddled by two very important dates in this progress forward, these steps forward, these incremental steps forward towards greater social justice that both led to the desegregation of schools in this country. Right? In 1947, something that many people forget was the lawsuit of Mendez versus Westminster. Because just like they were black-only schools, they were Mexican-only schools. And it would be an entirely different talk if I started talking about boarding schools for Native children, right? And so the desegregation of schools really began, the first step towards desegregation began with Mendez versus Westminster in California. And on the other side of that 1950 census, of course, is Brown versus School Board. And Thurgood Marshall used as a legal framework for his arguments to the Supreme Court the Westminster case, as the legal framework. And it led to desegregation of schools. That's progress. Let's not lose sight of that. It doesn't mean it's not complicated. It doesn't mean that we're done. But it is progress. So if we're doing a comparative, right, for high school completion, one pushback that you'll get from researchers is, well, of course you have more underrepresented people completing. Everybody, right, has completed at a higher rate. Yeah, that's true. However, look at the acceleration comparatively, right? 21.5% to 90%, you're looking at 4.5 times, right? 8% to 73, that's almost a 10 times increase. That's twice as fast, twice as great of increase as the white population, right? That's progress. It's real, right? We can see it in the data. We are more educated than we were before. Our access, again, grateful. I know that you don't get to the presidency, you don't get to a provostship without having to put in your dues earlier in your career. Many of you have taken part in the struggle to create greater access for more diverse students as part of your entire career. And the work that you've done has created more opportunity. There are more diverse students on your campus. Your work is not only appreciated, but it's working, right? And so let's not lose sight of that in the chaos right now. But let's be realistic, right? Remember this conversation? It almost seems like a lifetime ago. And so the numbers help us be grounded in reality. We can have a more accurate assessment of where we're really at, right? We're not in a post-racialized society, right? We talked about this very thin veil and layer, right? And what was really going on underneath that surface. We even talked about the SNL skit when we had the breakout, right? That people of color around this country, the night of the election, were still very, very nervous. And we're much less surprised, when the election was completed, right? But we had 8 years of this discourse. We had 8 years of this narrative, right? So for some populations, it really was a serious wake-up call. It is a very serious wake-up call. Just like we have, warm fall days a couple weeks ago, sometimes you have a very cool moment during the summer, especially in Michigan, right? I'm from California, I still wear a heavy coat sometimes 4th of July, right? Right? So we can have cool summer days. It doesn't mean that it's not summer anymore. It's still summer. And we've experienced other summers. And we've experienced racialized violence. and we've experienced hate. And just like my sister said this morning, we've experienced colonization, genocide, slavery. And so these numbers tell a story. We don't stop with the numbers, we tell the story, right? But the numbers do reflect, very accurately, that we're making progress. In this struggle to social justice, we're making progress. Why do we care? Right? We care because we love our neighbors, right? We care because we care about our young people and their futures, right? We care because we love this country. We love our institutions. One thing that we've always taught our students and society in general is that if you want a better life, get an education. Even that narrative is under attack right now. Right? Even that narrative is under now, even though the facts and the data continue to show that it's true. Again, from a researcher's perspective, I don't know when we had that change where facts and data don't matter anymore. Right? The fact is, one of the reasons I got into higher education as a career, a college degree breaks the cycle to poverty. It is quantitatively verifiable that not only when a low-income person graduates from college, will they move into a different strata in terms of socioeconomic status, but their children will as well. The work that you're doing, the mission that you're accomplishing, right, is breaking the cycle of poverty, not only for the young people that you work with in front of you, but for generations. And that's very powerful work. And that's why we have to keep working and not get distracted, right? We know we're headed in the right direction, and we can't let this stop us, right? There is a direct correlation between household income and education, right? There you can see it. It maps almost perfectly. Degree attainment and wealth. There's a real interesting wrinkle with Latinos that have a slightly higher household income. And there's some interesting reasons why. I think it mostly has to do with the racialized environment around salaries and even job offers and opportunities, because blackness is still one of the biggest stigmas, right? And so the census had to move towards ethnicity and adopting ethnicity, especially when my Dominican and Puerto Rican and Cuban brothers and sisters reminded that I'm black. I'm Latino, I'm Latina, I'm Latinx, I'm Hispanic, but I'm black, right? And so some Latinos, obviously not me, can pass for being white as well, right? And so that might create other opportunities, right, by being able to pass. And so I think that slightly, maybe, I'm theorizing, explains some of that differential, because blackness is still one of the biggest stigmas, especially when you're talking about hiring and equitable pay. But there's other benefits, and let's not forget about that, right? It's not just all about the money. And that's the title, right? It's not just about the money, the benefits of college education to individuals and society. If you haven't read that Lumina Foundation report, you should read it, and you should give it to your marketing director. Because these are the other things that we need to tell as a narrative why you go to college. Annual earnings, okay, sure. Twice as high. It's still true, right? Don't believe what's being said in terms of this narrative that's being perpetuated that college isn't worth it anymore, especially with high loans. It's still worth it, right? Lifetime, you're still making twice as much, right? But get this. It's about all indicators, health indicators as well as life outcomes and everything like that, life expectancy. So your health insurance, you're more likely to have your employer pay for your health insurance, right? You're more likely to have a retirement plan. I happen to sit on the ARP's Michigan's statewide board. I'm the youngest member, you'd think. I still get carded, I told you, I still get carded. And people get confused when I go to ARP office what I'm doing there. They think I'm delivering packages. Retirement is a big deal. People are outliving their retirement money and savings now, right? So imagine poverty when you're an elder of our community and how difficult that is. But college is the cure to that problem as well, right? Life expectancy. You're going to live longer if you go to college. The data proves it. You can work longer because you're not doing the kind of work that my mother did in the fields, right? You're not doing the kind of work that my father-in-law did in the auto plant. And your body can do this kind of work for longer. And now we're back to social justice. You are transforming this society in a positive way. And I mean the entire society. So we're breaking the cycle of poverty, right? But if we're going to imagine this more socially just and inclusive society, right, it also requires political power. You're more likely to vote and be engaged in the political process if you're college educated. You're more likely to be part of your community, engage in your churches, engage in your community groups, volunteer. You're building the social fabric, right, of your communities. This is why we talk about schools as hubs, right? Hubs to our communities. Universities are no different. They just have a larger scope, right? Larger community. And this one is very personal for me. You're less likely to go to jail. Both my wife and I do research around school-to-prison pipeline. Men of color. In 2002, and there's some discussion and discourse around the methods, but at least in this study that came out from the Justice Policy Institute, according to their methodology, in 2002, more African American men were in prison than enrolled in college. In 2002. We're not talking pre-1950s. We're not talking pre-Westminster. We're talking 2002. And I think the people that work in these communities, this is why we weren't surprised. One of the scholars, researchers that had some issues with the methodology that was used decided to go and do another study. I'm glad he did. What he was able to show, by 2013, there were finally more African American men in college than there were in prison. That's still a shameful statistic. If that's the bar, I'm glad twice as many African American men are now in college than were in 2001. I'm glad that rate doubled. But our bars are still very, very low. Our expectations are still way too low. And we are still very, very far from social justice. And we still have more work to do when they get to our schools. Wide racial and gender gaps continue to persist among young Americans when it comes to earning a college degree and getting a job. So it's great. Your admissions policies, your admissions and marketing, you're doing a great job getting your students to your front door, right? And now we have to figure out how to make our students feel completely whole, completely included, so that they stay and they graduate. Because remember, those statistics are based on college completion. They're not based on college attendance, right? So the transformative effects, right, are not as great when students go to some college as they are when they complete their bachelor's. And so, what can we do? Right? This was part of the conversation after Dr. Williams' presentation that we kind of had here in a small group. What can we do? Right? Again, I'm in a federal grant program, and I understand a lot of these pressures around budget, right? And real interventions, institutional interventions, how much they cost. One of my most important and influential mentors was the first black president of Wayne State. So many of you, especially among the presidents, might know Irv Reed, right? And one thing that Irv taught me is that money can't buy you love, but is an absolute sign of your affection. Right? Money can't buy you love, but money shows you that you're cared about, right? And it shows the values of your institution. We want kids to come to our school. We put money in admissions. We put money in marketing. We want our kids to continue to be able to pay for school. We put money in financial aid, right? We want our kids to experience an amazing education. We put money in our faculty. We put money in our advising. We put money in our colleges and our departments. If you want to do diversity, inclusion, equity, move this country towards greater social justice, you must invest. And I'm not just meaning sweat. I mean dollars. And so something that doesn't cost anything, we'll start there, right? Because some of you have tight budgets right now. I appreciate that. So something that costs nothing, and unfortunately costs the life of a young lady in South Carolina. Eliminate offensive monuments and mascots and buildings name and the names of buildings, right? It's coming up on Monday. For some, Columbus is a hero. For other populations, it's a reminder of oppression, colonization, and genocide. And if your university or college celebrates it, you have to be aware of the effect that it's going to have on your indigenous students. On the flip side, if you decide to be courageous and show leadership and show real inclusion, right, and you want to have a celebration of Indigenous Peoples Day, right, costs nothing and is absolutely within your power, right? Creating diversity statements that just sort of articulate in a very concrete way the values of your institution around diversity, inclusion, and equity. This is what we believe, right? We do this all the time when we're doing strategic planning. When we do our mission statements or our vision statements, make sure the diversity is in there, right? And that you articulate in a way that really reflects your commitments, right? And live up to those commitments. Same thing with policies. And this is the big one, hiring practices. I'm currently on a search committee right now, and I couldn't believe there weren't any competency questions around diversity. And so if you're in those rooms, and if you're on those committees, those small gestures that cost nothing financially, just to make sure that this playing field is level and that you're inviting people onto your campus that truly do embrace your and reflect your values around diversity, inclusion, and social justice, you have to ask those questions. You have to recruit those pools. You have to make it a part of your daily normal operations. And this costs nothing. You can celebrate diverse holidays. We've got plenty of heritage months and days and everything like that to celebrate. We can have events. And, you know, I chair Cesar Chavez on our campus, and Tony and I, we met as a result of an event. But when you talk to most of your students and most of your staff and faculty, they'll say, we don't want a party. We want justice. And so the party is fine. We're not going to say no to party. I'm a Latino. I love to dance, right? You can do salsa, bachata, whatever, right? But that's not where it starts. Or that's not where it stops, right? And the cost is very, very low. And if that's where you stop, people will see that as your commitment, right? That you're not spending any money on this. Diversity, equity, and inclusion courses. I've also been on general education requirement conversations. Again, think of yourselves, you don't have to raise your hand. How many of your campuses actually require your students to have one of these classes that teaches around diversity, inclusion, and equity and social justice? It's required, right? What you require in your GE is a reflection of the values of your institution, period. You want your students to leave competent in math and quantitative reasoning. You want them to leave competent in writing and their ability to engage in rhetoric, right? It's in there. You even want them to have exposure to biology or some kind of natural science or some kind of social science. It's in there. If we're really going to do the work and we're serious about doing the work, your diversity courses must be required. You cannot give a degree to anybody coming out of your institution who does not take that class. Why? Because this gives you the opportunity, just like my living learning community, to actually engage with individual students in the classroom in an environment where you're supposed to have this kind of discourse and expose them. If it's not required, guess what? Some of your students will, deuces, I'm out. And they'll avoid it, right? Just like your students will try to avoid calculus, you know? There is cost associated to this. And the greater your commitment, the greater the cost. So you could have one class, right? You have to pay for faculty, you have to pay for those facilities, da-da-da-da-da. If you have majors, if you have minors, right? If you have whole departments that are dedicated, right, to this kind of instruction and this kind of discourse and research, it's going to cost money, right? Things that cost more money. We were talking about safe spaces and inclusive spaces. They cost money. They don't just cost money to set up, right? But they cost money to maintain and to sustain and to grow. And that's really what we want on everything on our campus. When we do something well, it's sustainable and it can be grown, right? And it costs money. And so this is where we get back to the greater idea of social justice, including LGBT, right? Including Title IX, including accessibility, right? So these centers, these institutes, these units on your campus that are dedicated to these areas, they cost money, right? Some of you feel a little bit more pressure to do Title IX, right? Or you do a little bit more pressure to do accessibility because of the ADA, right? But again, let's start with the heart and let's look at the real vision, which is real social justice and not just responding to a crisis or a pressure point, because these investments are significant. And you can bring it all together. If you don't have a chief diversity officer at the highest level sitting in your executive committee or executive C-suite, you need to do it. To coordinate all this. Again, you have a director of financial aid. You have a director of marketing, right? Whatever you do well and you're committed to doing well that is a real value of your institution, you have somebody at a very high level in charge of it. Right? And so the chief diversity officer shouldn't be any different. Universities that are doing this the best, the chief diversity officer, just like the president, is just the tip of the iceberg. They have many chief diversity officers in every single college, right? Actually, some accreditation bodies are starting to require it, right? Medical schools are getting their chief diversity officers at their medical schools on board quick, right? So again, I'm proud of this body, right, of the West Michigan President's Compact, because you weren't responding to pressure when you came together originally, right? It was an act of sincere visionary leadership, right? Whether people are responding to pressure points or they're doing it out of visionary, courageous leadership, sometimes it still has to be done, right? And it's going to cost money. But it's the right thing to do. And know that your investment is going to pay off. If nothing else, I hope everybody can leave today in this conversation committed to the idea regardless of the chaos that's going on right now in today's society, we know we're headed in the right direction, and we're not going to take any steps back. I'm very grateful to my sister, Dr. Williams, for talking about resilience. We need to be resilient, and we need to say, no, we're not going back. I don't care about your flyers. I don't care about your leaflets. I don't care about your graffiti. We are not going back. We're not going to be afraid. We're not going to be intimidated, and we're not going to get distracted from the work that we know is moving this country in a positive direction towards greater social justice, equity, and inclusion. With that, really, we can't go back if you believe Cesar Chavez and this quote here, right? The inertia, the historical inertia and momentum, and the changing demographics of this country will create pressure points that really, progress is never a straight line. And there are 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, that kind of thing, right? But in the end, this is the direction that we're going, and history is bigger than any single moment, right? So once social change begins, it can't be reversed. You cannot uneducate the person who has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride. You cannot oppress the people who are not afraid anymore. We have seen the future, and the future is ours. With that, I'd like to thank you. Again, half a dozen different languages, but thank you so much.